I have witnessed the rise and the fall of many technologies in the vast cemetery of tech. Flash, laid to rest. Silverlight, a distant memory. Even parts of that net, once too immortal, now gather dust. Even PHP is now dead. PHP is not dead! Alright, PHP is not dead, but amidst the digital decay, one format refuses to die. In an age of digital intelligence and cutting-edge technology, PDF remains undying and unyielding. But we're not here to bury PDF. No. We're here to master it, to bend it to our will. Join us, brave souls, as we delve into the art of generating data-driven smart PDFs. Appsmith will conjure documents that practically build themselves, where will summon the spirits of efficiency and automation. Let's do this, Appsmith Wizards! Good evening, fellow seekers of digital enlightenment. Welcome to our haunted halls of code in this most spine-chilling of nights. I'm Kevin Blanco, your guide through the shadow realm of data-driven PDFs. You have bravely ventured here, drawn by the siren call of efficiency, the allure of automation. Tonight, we stand at the crossroads of the arcane and the cutting edge. What's our mission? To breathe new life into the undying format known as PDF. But be aware, for the path we tread is not for the faint of heart. We'll be conjuring documents from the very ether of our databases, summoning tables that write themselves, and binding all into PDFs that defy the very laws of manual labor. Tonight, I have my fellow wizard, Joseph, who is going to be showing you the haunted mansion of building these applications. Welcome, Wizard Joseph.
Hey, I've got my evil assistant here to help us resurrect the PDF.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Good, man. Yeah, I got a new kitten. My son found a kitten, and he's a handful.
Well, I mean, it's completely perfect for today.
Yeah. So PDFs, man, we're bringing them back to life.
Yeah.
All right,
Well,
I gotta set this guy down.
Yeah. All right.
All right, get into
cool.
work mode here.
So yeah, I mean, Joseph, the whole idea of PDF thing, it's something that we have been getting a lot of questions from the community everywhere. We get it on Discord, we get it on the YouTube videos, we get it everywhere, and it's just like the format is it's not dying. Like, although we have amazing artificial intelligence technology nowadays, although you can create amazing dashboards with Appsmith in just a matter of minutes, but still people need to generate PDF for different purposes. And so we have heard those questions, and the whole idea of this is to basically showcase how you can easily, programmatically, with data that you can bring from data sources, generate PDFs and make it easy, right?
Yeah, and with Appsmith, you can connect to any data source or API. So once you have that PDF generation process figured out, you can feed that from anything. Any of our SaaS connectors, your internal databases, local, or any other external APIs. So today we're going to look at how you can transform the data and then use the JS PDF library to programmatically generate a PDF one line at a time. There are a few different methods, and we'll kind of go over those first before we jump into this particular method. But yeah, I'm excited. This is actually came from a community request, like you mentioned. So someone in the forums was already using JS PDF, but AutoTable is a plugin for JS PDF that makes it really easy to insert a table of data and not have to worry about styling or sizing or columns. You just give it JSON. just like it is, and it will turn into a table in your PDF. So AutoTable is a little trickier to work with. In Appsmith, JS PDF is one of the suggested libraries. It's like one click to install it. But then getting AutoTable, the plugin working on top of that, that's a little trickier, not as straightforward. So that's what we'll work on today. And we're bringing PDFs back. They're not dead. There's still plenty of uses for them. And we always see questions on it in the forum. So yeah, for Halloween, we are resurrecting the PDF. It's not dead.
Well, I'm muted. Sorry. Well, I have my coffee here to go through it. I hope everyone also have your favorite beverage, and let's do it. Let's show us how to do it.
All right. So here's a quick walkthrough of what we're going to build. Before we get into the actual details of how it works, I just want to show where we're going with this. So I have some sample data here, and it has some nested data. There's order ID, and then there's all of the customer data in an object, this array of items for all the line items. And so we're just pulling in this raw data. I'm using some hard-coded sample data, but this could be from an API. It could be from your database. It may be multiple queries, if you've got the customer and the order and the line item all in separate tables, or it could all be one if you've got an API with GraphQL. So the point is, none of that matters. We're going to look at what you do with the data once you have it. You got the raw data, and then you want to turn that into a PDF. And so I have this set up to where it's pulling the order info and the customer info to create some row level data for this one record. And then it shows that table, the nested data for the array of items. And I didn't add any styling. I didn't tell it what colors to use. It's got alternate row colors here for formatting. A lot of that stuff just happens automatically with AutoTable. And you just give it an array of data, and it'll figure that stuff out and display it nicely for you. You can customize it further. Like with these prices here, you would probably want to align them, since they're prices. Little things like that. You can add extra settings, but it does a lot out of the box, and it's very little code. So rather than walk through, line by line trying to type it, since there's not much to it, we're going to go over more of the steps involved, how you figure this stuff out in the first place, instead of giving you the happy path and just doing it, and then just kind of talk about libraries and how this stuff works in Appsmith, because this is pretty easy, but it was also just one little piece of getting AutoTable connected that wasn't obvious. And so we wanted to put out some content on it for the community. So
perfect.
Yeah. So this is what we're going to build. I think what we'll do is start a new page, and I want to uninstall the libraries, start from scratch so they're not installed. But before we do that, let's just take a look at the library on the sidebar here. So this will show you the libraries that you currently have installed. All Appsmith apps have Lodash, Moment, and Forge installed by default. And then you can add others from the plus menu here. So you can see that I have a couple extras that have a delete button because, I added them, whereas the others are built in. So before we start the new blank page, I'm just going to delete these two so we can start from scratch. And that's going to break my app here. But we'll get rid of those two. And back to the editor, I'm going to start a new page. Okay. So we're going to build this thing from scratch. I had a table here, and then we want to view a PDF. So that's a document viewer. Now this PDF is displaying a PDF from this placeholder URL. You can just put a URL for a file that's hosted online, and whatever's in here, it'll download that PDF and display it. But we're going to generate a PDF dynamically. We're going to build it line by line and go through and create one. So instead of a URL, we don't want to have to create it and then upload it to a server and then download that URL, So we're going to use what's called a data URL. We'll get more into that later, but it's a way to put a base64 encoded version of the file here.
Awesome.
And then that sample data. I'm going to go back to page 2 here where I started out and just copy this sample data. So this data is nested. It's an array of orders. So at the top level, it's just an object with orders and then an array. Let me zoom in a little here. And then each order has that order ID, a customer object, And inside that customer, it's nested even further for the address, so it requires a little bit of data transformation, and it's not the easiest. It could have been flat data and easier to work with, but real world situations, this is the kind of stuff you've got to work with, right? So trying to show those extra steps and make it a little harder to work with, so we have to jump through some hoops here. Now there's an items array. So each one of these is just a row on those line items, and you got a few here, and then it goes to the next person. And so I'm just going to copy this sample data to page 3 here where I'm working, and we're going to build on top of that. So I want to see that sample data here in the table, and we can connect that here to switch to JS mode. I think I need to refresh before it sees my JS object. Sometimes that autocomplete doesn't work right off the bat. Oh, it's sample data. That's right. Because I've already renamed it, because I copied it. If you create a brand new one, it'll be called JS Object 1 at first.
Right.
Here's the order data, and the end goal is not to display it in a table. So I could flatten this stuff just for looks, but really I just want to select a row and then see that PDF update over here. Okay, so that's pretty much the UI setup. That's all we're really going to do with widgets. Most of this is going to be in the JS objects and importing libraries. So I think this is a good time to go over like the different methods for generating a PDF before we get too much into this one method. So JS PDF is a library that builds a PDF one line at a time. You pass in some data, or you might just, hard code it and say like, thank you for your order or whatever, and you put in a line, then the next line position. So that's one approach. That's what we're going to do today. And I think it gives you the most control, but it is a little more, it's code heavy. If you're okay with that, if you want to write each line, then there's a ton you can do with it and make it dynamic and flexible. Another approach is a lot of platforms have like a template that you use. So there's like a PDF or a Word doc or something that you design, and it's got a placeholder for customer name, and then you can put in some bold text or add an image, and it merges with that template. That's a totally different approach. There's other PDF libraries for that. And then there's HTML to PDF, which is another library. And with that one, you're just like it sounds, you build it in HTML first, you get the page looking the way you would want, and then you merge or convert that HTML to a PDF. So there's so many approaches. I'm not saying this is the best one, but before you dive in, you should kind of know what are the options and see if that's the one that's going to work best for your use case. So just kind of wanted to go through like the different approaches there. What do you think, Kevin? Like, do you have a preference or one that you think's best for certain cases?
I'm usually leaning towards the simplest one. I'm a lazy developer.
Yeah.
And thankfully, Appsmith makes things even easier for us. So why don't we try HTML to PDF?
Yeah. So actually, this one's JS PDF. HTML is one of the other options. I was just wondering, like, if you had a preference or one that you've used before, if you think one's stronger for certain use cases. But we are going to do JS PDF for this one.
Yeah, JS PDF. Sorry, I was confused. Yeah, that's the one that being recommended to the community and the one that I've been using. Actually, we built a demo for one of our customers a couple of weeks ago. And again, the PDF use case came out, and yes, JS to PDF. I mean, it's extremely simple because again, we have this document viewer widget that you can pretty much pass data in base 64, and that makes things so much easier because they were thinking about, like you said, generating the PDF from some sort of service, storing it on an S3 bucket, and then pulling that into the document viewer. And I said, no, man, you can just generate the data on the fly, make it base 64, and pass it to the document viewer. It's supported, and they were like mind blown. So yeah, I think this is the method that we want to go forward to.
Cool. Okay. And then we'll get into data URLs and explain how that works so that you don't have to upload it to a server first. So let's start out with installing JS PDF. That's the core library that you're going to need regardless. And then if you want to add the tables, then you add JS PDF AutoTable, which is a separate plugin that JS PDF uses. You have to have both. So you click the library icon here on the left sidebar, and then the plus button here, and you'll see JS is one of the suggested libraries, recommended libraries here. So one click to install it, and then you'll see it appear on the sidebar over here. It adds a link to the docs so that if you got any questions on the formatting and different methods, and let's go back here. And then if you expand this, it shows you the name that you will use to invoke this, to reference it in the code. For the most part, it's the same, but Lodash uses an underscore. Moment is moment, forge is forge. But you'll see when we get to AutoTable, some of them will be a little different. So just because you have it installed, you might not be able to use the exact code samples that you find online. It might say some specific format to invoke it here, and you try that and it's not working. So just try, checking the docs, and you'll see that AutoTable, this .default, this is one of the things that was throwing off some users in the community. So some examples show it just used directly, AutoTable, and then parentheses. And then other times it's this .default, depending on how it's been imported or how it was exported from where it was hosted. And so that's the thing I wanted to point out, is when you're importing these and then you go to use it, one thing is check what it's named on the import. And then if that's not picking up, if it's not auto-completing or whatnot, check out the docs and see if there's some extra .default, or if you have to reference it differently depending on how it was imported. So that's the kind of main thing we wanted to show, because most of this is pretty easy and straightforward. And so we're going to go more into those details since we got some time. This one's pretty easy to do. But we have JS installed now. And before we get into AutoTable, I just want to do a simple example using JS only. So we'll go back to the JS editor here. I'm going to add a new JS object, and I'm going to call this one PDF utils. So we've got some logic for generating the PDF separate from the sample data. I like to keep that stuff separate, especially when you get bigger apps. You might have one just for config stuff, one for functions. So in here, we're going to write a function to use JS and just do some basic stuff. And I have a written version of this tutorial on the community portal. And I just want to show you where to find that. And then we can take some of the code from here just to save some typing. So the first part, once you have the sample data in there, you've got something to work with. Then we're going to put this in the PDF utils JS object. And you can see that it's taken in an order, which is a single order out of the array. And I'm just grabbing the first order from the sample data. So this default, when you say you got a parameter name and then equals whatever, that gives it a default value so that you can test it. So, it's got something in there. And if I run this, let's see, AutoTable is not a function. I got to import AutoTable first. Let's comment out the AutoTable part and just not add the table yet. Okay, so what we're getting here now, I want to show just the simplest version of JS without the AutoTable stuff. You do doc equals and then new JS If you do just JS so you'll see that auto completes. It's an object, so inside of it is the function that we actually need. Since this is just an object, right? You got to go inside of that. And now here's all the methods. So it's nested a level, and I think there's an extra prefix compared to the doc versions. It wouldn't say JS twice, but it's just the way that it imports in Appsmith. So I wanted to show that. And now you see a second JS auto completing, but this time it's a function. So let me just undo that and get back. Here we go. So you do that, you declare a new instance of JS and this is an object that has methods, and one of them is to output a data URL. So you can add text to it. In here, we're actually here in the table. I didn't, this is the part that I commented out, but you can add text to the PDF using that .text method and loop through and add items to it. and do it one line at a time, and then return that as this data URL. Now let's look at this a little closer. So you see there's data colon, and then a file type or a MIME type. And it's, in this case, application PDF. It could be like PNG or SVG or whatever it is, the file type. Then you'll have a semicolon and possibly a file name. Not every time, but that part's optional. And so after the base 64 here, it's a comma. There shouldn't be any other commas because a comma is not a valid base 64 encoded character, and it doesn't appear up here. And so if you split this, if you just split it by comma, the first part is all of the metadata details about it so that the browser knows what to do with it. And then the second part after the comma, that's your base 64 encoded value of it. And I wanted to go more in depth on this because a common thing that comes up in the forums is somebody's trying to display an image or some type of file in an image widget or a document viewer or whatever it is, and they only have this part. Okay, for that to work in place of a URL, you have to make it a data URL, which starts with data colon and then the file type and then whatever. So you don't necessarily need the file name part, but you do need this first chunk saying what type of file it is, base 64, comma, and then all of that data. And so if we put this into the document viewer now, we can take this build PDF and just reference that right here. So that's in my PDF utils, build PDF. And I think because I commented out the table, there's just nothing to render. So let's go ahead and install AutoTable, just so I can get that error out of here and show how this works. I was trying to do like little pieces at a time and build up to it, but I think we'll just jump to the finished working one here and then talk through it. So I'm going to copy the URL from here. You can try the ESM ones because sometimes that it can bundle stuff and avoid having to do multiple imports. But in this case, there's just the one URL anyway. So I'm going to use the default one and just copy the URL only. If you're working with a library that shows 2 or 3 things here that you got to import, you might try the ESM one. That URL, that version, that can grab multiple things at once, but then these tend to be more compatible. So I'm just going to use this one, and we will import AutoTable here. Now, do you see how it's got the JS-PDF plugin AutoTable as the listing over here, but then inside of it, you can see like the name that it's going to reference it as. So we can go back here and uncomment out the table. All right, and let's see if this gives us a PDF we can view now. Here we go.
Cool.
Yeah, so we're only doing AutoTable. I'm not using regular JS PDF at this point to add text to it. All of the text that we are adding right now is just AutoTable. And just to simplify the example and focus on that part of it, so let's look at the code here a little closer now that we got that part working. We create the instance of JS PDF, which is this const doc, and you have to use new because it's creating an instance of that, right? So you could have multiple that you're working with if you wanted to do that, have doc1, doc2, or whatever. And then we loop over the items. So I'm grabbing the items from the first order. The 0 index here is the first order. And so then let's see here, I'm creating an array, and the way that AutoTable expects the data, it's a 2D array. So the headers, this is one array, and then inside of it is another array with the header names. And then row 2 should be another array with an array of the values inside of it, right? So it's a 2D array, and the header, you only have one row. So I'm just building this one manually with a 2D array of double square brackets. But then when it comes to the item data, the body, this one I'm creating by mapping over the data. I'm mapping it to an array. Now map already returns an array, right? But I need a 2D array. And so I'm mapping it to, and then here you've got open and close array, and it puts all of these values into another array inside of that. And I'm calculating the price here, like times the quantity, because that's not in the raw data. And then row 1 is the one I built here. Row, however many are left, basically, it puts on extra rows here from this map, and then just returning that as a data URL. So there's almost nothing here code-wise. One line to initialize it. This could easily be, flattened out into one line. It's just like this for readability. And that's building the data set in the right format. If it was already in the right format, it would just be one line to initialize the PDF, one line to add the table, and then return it. So it's pretty simple to work with. You can see that it is, it's added that styling. I didn't go as far as like looking into the details of how to add your own CSS. I know you can do it, but I think that part's fairly straightforward once you got it working to pass in an options object. And so I just wanted to kind of walk through how you get the raw data in there, transform it, get it to load up in a table. And so now let's like finish this out and add data from the rest of the document, because it should have a header, some details about the customer and whatnot.
Right.
So
So you can combine like data that is AutoTable with just standard data for the header and the footer maybe of the PDF. Like,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, all of this data was inserted with that one line from AutoTable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even using the doc.text method. That's the normal, just pure JS PDF way.
Right.
And let's look at the docs for that. So if you go to the libraries in the sidebar, all of them have this little link to the docs for it. We'll go to JS PDF, and there's tons of different methods here. The text method takes at least 3 parameters. The 4th one is optional, which is this big options object. There's a ton of other parameters, but rather than have, 20 different parameters, it's the 3 that you really need. So what text do you want to add to the PDF? And then what's the X and Y position where you want to add it? And then optionally, you can add this options object and tell it how to align it, what color, just tons of extra stuff that you can add to it. There's also a lot of styling that you can set at the document level. So rather than do it for this one piece of text, you can set the color, or let's just search for it here. Get fill color, drawing color, text color. So you can draw lines and shapes, and basically here's set text color. That's what I was looking for. So if you run this line before you add text, then all of the text after that will have that color. And then you'd have to run set text color again and then switch to the next one or whatever. But it's really easy to use, and we've got a few examples on that. So I kind of skipped past the adding details at the top here and went straight to the table in my tutorial here.
Right.
Here's where we add the header and footer. So let's copy this, and I think everything else stays the same. We're using the same sample data. So now if I run this, we've got some data at the top here that's from the customer level. And you can also see that there's larger font here. So let's look at how that's set up in the code now. I have a function to add a header. So doc.set font size, then doc text to add text with that size. And you can see that see the 14 repeating here? That's the left margin. So that's the X, and I'm adding a line of text with the same margin at every one, but then it goes up from 15 to 25 to, I think, yeah, when the font size goes down to 12, then the increment changes, you see? So, excuse me. So that's the basic approach. It's doc.set text, and then in between there, you might set the font size, set the color, whatever it is. Template literals come in real handy inside of here to concatenate some data. But this is a function to just do the header itself. And I'm setting that as a const. I've got a separate one here to just do the same thing with the footer to kind of keep that logic contained. And then when it comes to building the whole thing, it's just add the header, make the body with the table, and then add the footer. So I can see everything that's happening right here, and then just look up here to adjust those two functions. But But yeah, that's everything. The table part is really easy. The header and the footer is just like the JS PDF stuff we've showed before. And I just kind of connected them that way to where I can isolate and work on each one separate as its own function. But it's really easy to use. This data URL string here, this is the magic that like takes the work out of it for you of, okay, now that I've got this file, I need to open a file reader and wait. And then once the file reader's loaded, grab it as a blob and then turn that blob into a URL. Like there's a lot of stuff that it's doing in the background for you automatically. And once you figure out how to connect it, you could take data from any API now, transform it, and just generate PDFs from multiple data sources from different APIs. So ton of cool stuff you can do with it. And this is just kind of touching the surface.
That's great. And actually, one of the things that makes me think about this is, and in case anyone who's watching this missed it last week, we had our Appsmith work event. There was a great launch event where we talk about the future of work and how Appsmith is leading the way towards building efficient AI-ready applications. And one of the things we announced is packages. So in case you missed it, let me put here a subscribe button. Oh, actually, let me bring the direct package link. So this is going to take you to the direct series of videos on packages, because what you could do is write it once and reuse it on multiple applications. You can just bring the JS PDF library, all of these things, having your own style, your own CSS, and just build it once, and then you can call your PDF generator package across your workspaces and your applications, and you'll be able to generate packages just from one instance, so you don't have to rewrite code. So make sure to watch that package video in case you didn't do it. And even also, I'm thinking, Joseph, is you talk about workflows during the Appsmith work event, and I'm even thinking about the fact that you could build programmatically PDFs and generate
Oh
PDFs, and
yeah,
maybe store those PDFs somewhere, but doing them automatically without you having to execute the function. You could do a workflow
right.
that just get the data, generate the base64, and then you will have that and be able to generate a PDF on the fly, right?
Yeah, that would be good for periodic reports.
Right.
Where every week or every month you want it outputted as a report that you can email. So you could generate that and query the data on a schedule, set a cron job, and then it could email it for you or just save it on your network drive or whatever it is.
Awesome. So yeah, remember to subscribe, everyone. In case you haven't, there's a lot of content we're pushing. Joseph is doing the Friday Tech workshop. We're pushing more and more tutorials and content about how to leverage reusable applications, not just pieces of code, but actually building apps that make sense. So that's pretty neat. Make sure to subscribe. Is there anything else we wanted to cover, or I think we got pretty much
There's
everything,
one
right?
thing I wanted to mention. Yeah, I forgot to cover it when we were installing the library.
Okay.
So we do support installing external libraries, like I showed. You can click here, the plus, and then paste in a link. Now, you're going to find some that won't work. It'll fail to install because there's a lot of things these libraries could do if we let them do their full, capability. A lot of them try to access or manipulate the DOM, try to read stuff from the window. They could control the way that your app behaves. They could hijack stuff. It's just not safe, right? There's certain libraries that we can allow safely, but the ones that try to access or manipulate the DOM or the window object, those are going to fail to install, but you can run them in a custom widget. So I don't want to get too much into custom widgets on this one, but just to show you real quick, you go to new UI element and drag in a custom widget. And once you go to edit the source of this custom widget, here's where you pass in data, the default model. This is just to pass in raw data. You go to edit source, and now here you can import any library. This one's using React, and it cycles through the data that's being passed in. And then there's an example using Vue or Vanilla.js or any other library you want to import. So it gets over that limitation, but now you have a different restriction for security that it can't communicate or talk to the rest of your app outside of the one safe control point that we give you. So you can update the Appsmith model to pass some data back out and use Appsmith trigger event to tell Appsmith to do something. And then back at the custom widget in the editor here. Then you define the events here, and you tell what the rest of your app should do. Should it run an API or connect to query your database or whatever it is? So you can still get everything to work, but there's that separation, and you have to pass things through this event so that it's secure. So the library that might not work in installing here, it will definitely work in a custom widget, but then you have to create those events and save data to the model and connect everything to pass data back and forth so that it's secure.
That's pretty neat. And in case, anyone who's watching doesn't know what custom widgets are, I've put the QR code right now so you can scan it and go directly to our playlist in Appsmith YouTube, so you can learn about custom widgets. We also have a lot of videos from Joseph on different custom widgets, like generating automatically forms using custom widgets and JSON form and all other sorts of cool stuff. So yeah, in case you don't know what custom widgets are, there's the QR code. But yeah, that's a great method in case a library you're using needs to manipulate the DOM or do other stuff that, in the context of the standard document widget or the standard JavaScript context, is not something you can achieve, right?
Right. Just for security, they're isolated, but you can pretty much get any of those libraries to work in a custom widget and still achieve the same end goal. It's just not giving that library full access to your entire app. It's just that one component and whatever data you choose to pass into it.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things you mentioned, which I see a lot of questions from the community, and it makes sense, is that you see the documentation from whatever library you're using, and then you try to do the same on the Appsmith context. It's not going to work out of the box. But you have to understand that in order to support some of the libraries, we have to do these things. For example, the way you initiate or instantiate a new GS to PDF, that you have to do GS to PDF dot GS to PDF,
Mm-hmm.
like that's because you're not importing the library as any other JavaScript standard project, that you are extrapolating the actual object and then you're calling the constructor of that class, etc. Like that's not happening in the Appsmith context. So that's why you have to do those little things here
Yeah.
and there. But sometimes people think that the library doesn't work, but in fact it's just that you have to do those little things to adjust it to the Appsmith context. So we have to make sure that we can support the standard Appsmith runtime and also custom libraries, which is always obviously a complex thing to do. But most of the JS libraries out there works in the Appsmith context. You just have to make sure that you have to understand how JavaScript works in order to just adjust things. But there's always, Joseph, who's the master, on our Discord channel. So if you have any questions, just reach out to us.
Yeah, especially if you've got one that fails to install or it installs and it won't work and it's not trying to do anything with the DOM or the window object. If it seems like it should be safe, but you're still, not able to install it or it just isn't working right, definitely reach out because we want it to support as much as we can while still being secure, and only force you to go use a custom widget if there's just no way you could safely run that library. And there's still quite a bit that you can do, but pretty much anything UI related, if you want to interact with the UI, and rather than giving full access to our widgets, you just do that in a custom widget. And what I try to do is limit the scope of the custom widget. Like I made a chat widget recently, which shows a chat history, and then underneath it, there's an input to type your prompt and a send button. And I could have made the input and the send button all part of the custom widget. But to limit the scope and simplify it, I only built a custom widget for displaying a history of chat. And then I used a regular Appsmith widget for the input and a regular button for the button. And that was way easier to tie in the APIs and integrate, and less passing of events back and forth from the custom widget. So just keep that stuff in mind. Like we have so many widgets, a lot of what you might want to build custom could be 90% regular widgets and just one piece of it a custom widget.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question. In the document viewer, there is this download icon. Does that work with data 64 generated, or
Oh yeah, I don't think the way that I'm screen sharing is going to show it, but it does pull up the download. Yeah, it lets you pick where you want to save
Awesome.
it. It just, I don't think it shares that.
Yeah, we don't
But
see it,
yeah,
but
it works. It
it
doesn't
works.
care that it's a local base 64 thing that you just generated on the fly, which is
Awesome.
pretty cool. That you don't need to have a, I don't want to say physical. It's not ever really a physical file, but it kind of feels like it once it's saved to a disk, right? Like it exists on something physical. We're just generating it on the fly. It's in memory, and you can still download it or print it or send it through an API or whatever.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. You're going to be saving money from bucket storage for sure. If your goal is just to generate a PDF and people to download it and have like a report or something,
Mhm.
you can even share like on an email, something like that, or just for archive purposes. Like you will save tons of storage when it comes to like a bucket on S3 or Google Storage or something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think we got pretty much everything, right, Joseph?
Yeah, like I said, this one was real simple, straightforward, but at the same time, if you don't know about that JSPDF dot JSPDF a second time because of the way it imports, and AutoTable, you might have to do dot default if you import from, if it doesn't give it that default export. So once you got those two things right, then the examples in their docs work. But yeah, if you miss that one thing, you try every example in their docs and nothing seems to work right. So figured it was worth doing a video on, and shout out to Paul for asking in the community, because I knew JSPDF was working, and didn't realize that AutoTable was a little tricky to get set up. So I actually figured this out for him and then wanted to do a video on it.
Awesome. That it's great. Yeah, thank you everyone who reach out on Discord. If you're not there, also join our Discord channel. If you're not in the community portal where Joseph it's building amazing tutorials and I'm trying to keep up with him with some tutorials as well, make sure to join our community portal. It's completely free. You can just create your account and start following some topics. Uh, and also obviously our YouTube channel. So Joseph, thank you so much. I think we achieved our goal today. We summoned the power of generating PDFs, and I think anyone can go just now and relax and enjoy Halloween.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you hosting, man. This was fun. And if anyone has questions on generating PDFs, feel free to reach out on Discord.
All right, magicians, take care. See
All
you
right.
on the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.